Anyone want to start?
Back to hell with you!
How long are we going to play games, Louis?
Now that you've shot 2 seasons of Interview with the Vampire, what are your reflections on Lestat and Louis' relationship? Is it love or is it just the vampire bond gone awry?
Love, right? It's like the deepest, most upsetting kind of love that you could possibly experience, which the vampire bond is tied into that, right?
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, there's the vampire bond between Lestat and Claudia as well in terms of maker and fledgling or whatever, you want to use. But yeah, I think Louis and Lestat it's dark, it's bleak, it's painful. You can only love someone in that capacity when you can destroy some, like in that capacity. So the love for each other that they have is cyclical.
You can't love someone or something that you could never hate. You could never have the capacity to hate. And then you can't hate someone unless you love them enough to care enough to hate.
Yeah.
Delainey, you've taken over the role of Claudia for season 2. I want to know, first day on set, what was it like? And did Jacob or anybody give you any advice, or were there any pranks? What was it like?
The first day on set was probably the best day ever for me. I'll never forget my first day. I was doing a lot. I had Jacob with me and I had my lenses for the first time as well. So I was adjusting to that and Jacob was like, you'll see sometimes and sometimes you won't see. But yeah, my first day was the greatest day ever probably filming, because it was like the initiation, into the role. And I was like, now I'm really Claudia. Had my hair, had my lenses, had my costume. Everything was kind of like coming together for me. We had these like amazing coats that were heavy, but covered in fur. And yeah, I took so many pictures that day. And Jacob gave me the Chronicles of Anne Rice. As a gift.
Alphabetary.
Yeah. And yeah, my first day was amazing.
So do all 3 of you now have like a book club where you go over all of the books and where you are and where your characters are?
Yeah, we do. We meet
Wednesdays.
Wednesdays. Some depend, like Delaney's, not always.
Yeah.
We talk about Tab. We talk about Tab Cola and we talk about the vampire Vittoro.
Yeah, the vampire Vittoro and Santino. And
Santino and the gang.
Yeah.
Sam, Lestat at the end of season 1 is clearly not dead, but he's not quite alive either. Can you share a little bit about his role this season and where his mind's at?
He is a vision or a kind of hallucination or a dream that Louis is having. I don't know where his mind is at when he's like that, because he's sort of more Louis than he is anything else. And it's sort of like an echo of parts of their relationship that maybe Louis doesn't want to necessarily talk about or remember in his interview with Malloy. And then he does re-enter, as you've seen, the story. But how he does that, we have to wait and see.
Involves dimensional portals.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say.
But yeah, like obviously, he's not dead because he's, as Malloy pointed out, he's probably surviving off rat dinner and
rat dinner.
Rat dinner. His least favorite kind of dinner.
Ratatouille.
Yeah, ratatouille.
Ratatouille.
Not a fresh rat out of the dump. But like these are very, very powerful monsters. So it takes quite a lot to kill them. Claudia is the most powerful, I think. She's got a lot of strength.
Yeah, and mental strength as well. They're not as arrested them.
I think she's very underestimated by the vampires.
Let's talk about Louis and Claudia in Paris for a little bit, because it's interesting. It's where Lestat became a vampire. That was clear from the trailers. But the 2 of you have carved out a different life than you had in New Orleans. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The thing for me that I find really interesting about at least the first 2 episodes with Louis and Claudia, before they kind of separate a little bit, is that there's something inherently like outsiderish about a vampire. Like you feel like they feel and are outsiders. They're kind of in the shadows. And the whole point of this trip, at least for Claudia, is to like find some belonging, find like a community, like a vampire community. And actually they end up more like outsiders, and they're kind of they've stepped into a really hostile territory. It's really tragic. And also I think that for me at least, the big tragedy of the season is that they lose each other. That actually they could have been each other's community there wasn't so much bad blood. They could have taken care of each other better. Louis really f***ed up with Claudia a lot this season.
Well, let's talk about some of that community that they try to find, because another central part of season 2 is the Théâtre des Vampires. And we know from the trailer that Lestat has a connection to it. So, Sam, first, can you explain that connection? And then, Jacob and Delainey, can you talk about how it relates to each of your characters, that concept of found family?
It's a big part of who he is. And it's a kind of a twisty-turny series of events that connects Lestat and Armand through this space. But Lestat has always been outside of the rules of regular vampire law. He doesn't really want to conform. So, you know, he says it to Claudia in season 1. He says the vampires out there are vicious. The vampires in Europe are much, much worse. Depends on how you remember a certain thing, when it might have also just been an actually honest warning that you want to go to Europe, you want to find a vampire community. There is no vampire community. The vampires they don't know who they are. They're obsessed with kind of like, you know, identifying as this sort of like, we are evil, we hate ourselves, we're going to kind of, you know, worship God through our kind of commitment to Satan. It's very anti-Lestat kind of sentiments. Lestat's all about like, you know, celebrate yourself for what we are. We're beautiful creatures. We're at, you know, like, don't fall into the trap of hating who you are, which is a big part of the dynamic between Louis and Lestat, because there's a lot of conflict there, because there's a lot of shame when you are this kind of like ruthless killer and you feel incredibly guilty because you have to kill people to survive. Lestat, it's not his MO. He's not going to be made to feel guilty for the thing that he didn't choose. He's going to make the most of it, embrace it. You know? So Lestat is always about building his own community. I don't know if he built a very good community with Louis and Claudia, because he's a really complex and difficult character, and he needed to learn some lessons that he can't force them to be a part of the community that he wants them to be a part of. Like, they needed to kind of listen to each other more. He needed to learn more. He needed to be killed, basically, to kind of get a grip. That's just pretty much so much I'm going to say about the theater of vampires. It's something that Lestat did start. It's obviously something that he ended up leaving for a reason.
So, Jacob and Delainey, how does the theater affect the two of you? And why didn't your characters really heed Lestat's warning?
Well, I think for Claudia, it's Lestat telling her that, so she's not going to listen anyway. But with the theatre, Claudia has no idea what she's walking into. She thinks in the beginning, again, it's all in her mind. She's created this kind of vision that she thinks Paris is. She's going head on into it, but she has no idea what she's walking into. And I think her circumstance plays a big part in why this kind of thing happens to her. It's always said that when people are turned to vampires young, they don't live very long. She thinks it's what she wants, and it's essentially not.
Louis just doesn't like theatre kids. He's not into it. He's like, nah, you lot are extroverts. I think he's not. He's just not keen on the kind of extroversion of the theatre and the vampire. He finds it all a bit crass. Louis is not somebody who's gonna celebrate the theatrical killing of humans, the theatrical ritualistic killing of human beings. It's not his vibe.
But he does seem to be open up to his artistic side a little bit in Paris.
Yeah, he loves art. You know, he loves human art. But I just think that he sees it as like a sideshow. Like, he wants to, I think when he gets to Paris, he's like, I want to feel Paris. Like, I want to understand Paris as it is, like in a human context. Like, I think Claudia, the theatre, is Claudia's thing. And it was Lestat's thing as well. You got dragged. There's a line in the show where he's like, I've been to the theatre too much in my life. Like, Lestat used to take him there. And there's so many bad associations as well with going to the opera and having to pretend to be a valet. And even though he's a rich man, and he always was, I think he likes the idea of being like on the streets, like finding out like what are the kind of underground movements, like what are and ultimately, I mean, I'm just kind of giving away his whole arc, I guess, but he's like, I'm a businessman. I'm good at like operating in lots of different environments and fitting in and using it to my advantage.
And also, his life in New Orleans as a Black man is very different than his life in Paris
Yeah.
And it feels like he's celebrating that a little bit.
Louis does find a community. It's just that it's a human community, which is kind of predictable. You could have known that that's what Louis's journey was going to be. You don't really see it in the show, but you see certainly like the effect it's had on it.
Jacob, when Louis introduced Daniel Malloy to Armand as the love of his life, why does he call Armand that, and how does that love differ from his love for Lestat?
So I think it's completely different. I think like Louis and Armand's relationship is quite circumstantial, like when it first started. And I think Louis is just looking for something different. I think he just wants to like have a different kind of energy and have a different dynamic and be I don't know, if maybe feel a little bit more in charge. Even though I think that Louis is more in charge in the relationship with Lestat than he'd ever admit to. Like he controls the weather in his own way.
Last question, and this is for all three of you. There's so many fans of this show that are so excited to see it come back. If you had a message for them, what would it be?
Thanks for watching.
I would also say, I'd say that like fans of the show and fans of the books, like even if you know what's coming in the second part of this story, like be prepared to have your heart broken, even if you know what's coming. Be prepared for a lot of feelings and complications. This is a even messier season than season one in terms of people's behavior and actions.
Yeah, it's a messy season. There's no right or wrong really at the end of the day, and they're all kind of deeply flawed characters, and that's why they're interesting. So yeah, be prepared to
have complicated feelings about everybody.
have very complicated feelings.
Yeah.
I walk the night, capturing disappointment and regret. Wait, stop the tape. We should get every detail right. I'm listening.
Eric, I'm going to start with you. I just spoke with Rolin Jones and Mark Johnson, and they said that when they were casting Daniel, they actually had your picture up on the wall as the goal for Daniel. I want to know if you knew that, and also what it feels like to expand on this iconic character going into season 2.
I did not know that. However, there were all kinds of weird indications. Like we're in this sort of woo-woo kind of world of spirituality and so forth. So I was visiting Chicago. I was staying in an apartment that had, for some reason, 8 Anne Rice books in it. On my way there to Chicago, I had been thinking about all the roles I've played, and I thought, is there anything left that I want to do? And I thought, I really want to play a vampire. That was 24 hours before the offer came. And in fact, well, at any rate, so there was all that. I didn't know, but there is an uncanny parallel between the life of Daniel Malloy and my own life. Now, the young Daniel Malloy, who we see in the show, isn't that different from the young Eric Bogosian hitting New York in the mid-70s. And also, on one level, kind of is willing to do anything, take anything, walk in any door. I was always up for different stuff, but also thinks of himself as a writer and is actually not a very good writer at that point, and had to learn how to become a better writer. And then I had a career, and I still have a career, and now much older and sort of disgruntled older guy. If you remember the first episode of the first season. The first season is more investigative journalism, really. I mean, and it's with a threat of being killed at any moment by these vampires, and not really understanding what's going on, sensing that something's up, and I gotta find out what it is, which we find out at the last moments of the first season. But the second season, of course, is for me anyway, down the rabbit hole of my own personal existence, which is, of course, a big departure from the book, and exciting stuff to play as an actor. I mean, it was a tremendous gift that Rolin brought me into this.
Absolutely. And Assad, Armand plays several roles in this show. And actually, Rolin also said he felt the most for your character in season 2. But you have so many roles. I'm not even just talking about the ruse as Rashid from season 1, but you're playing Armand across different time periods, and he's a very old vampire. Was that exciting or a challenge for you? Because every time you're on camera, it's like a different facet of Armand.
I remember when I was, before we started shooting, I think I worked out, I was like, okay, there's maybe 6, possibly 7 versions of Armand that we're kind of glimpsing into this season. And for an actor, it's like a dream come true. And even season 1, going into this part as Rashid, knowing that I'm mainly observing, but there's an undercurrent of something going on, that was also really, really like crash course. And watching you guys kind of make the work was beautiful. And so then I had to come in and sort of then go, okay, how many versions of Armand can I juggle here, and kind of and how do I differentiate them, also carry on the history? And we shot out of sync kind of thing. We started with episode 5, then we went into Paris and meeting Louis and Claudia for the first time and introducing them to the coven, and then in between that we were sporadically coming into Dubai and sort of playing this dynamic. It was a challenge, but it was also like, I think, such a gift as an actor to sort of, run around these different costumes and heads. There was always a through line, and Armand has a very, very sort of specific goal and through line that he's following, and you hope you kind of see it, which is his sort of need to be loved and be and feel love and preserve that love. And I think Armand will do anything to preserve his sense of love, his sense of sort of acceptance, because I think he has lived a rough life even before he became a vampire. And if you know the books, we know his history is dark, really, really dark.
Really, really dark. And we see some of that quiet intensity, I think, in season 1 when Daniel jumped up and hauled off and slapped Louis. There was a moment, and that was, Armand is showing considerable amount of restraint here. Are we going to see Armand be a little bit more aggressive in season 2?
A little bit more, maybe, hopefully. I think my, and as we go along, my kind of goal has been with Rolin, I've always said this to him, I want to just unleash a little bit more of Armand here. I want to and I think season 1, he had to sort of hold it. Season 2, we are also still seeing a very controlled, especially in the beginning, a very controlled and dignified version of Armand. And I think he prides himself on that. I think he's worked very hard to sort of build this sort of integrity and build this life with Louis. And I think, again, because he wants to preserve it, he is going to control himself as methodically as possible. But there will be moments where you will see that crack. I think we need to earn those moments, the moment where you see how actually chaotic and clueless he actually can be. We needed to earn that. And I think why we had to sort of really make sure that we kept the lid on him as much as possible throughout Dubai and throughout Paris.
Absolutely.
I mean, I always knew that Armand in the present day underestimates Daniel and then starts to realize that he's underestimated, has to rejigger the whole thing. But where did he come? Why is he underestimating? Because he knows Daniel. He knows Daniel from 1973 or 7, whatever it was. And he that's who he thinks he's dealing with. He thinks he's dealing with just a grown-up, older version of that knucklehead kid who had good intentions but really was totally lost. So of course he can control this guy, and then he finds out that that kid has changed over this 40-something years. He's not the Daniel Malloy that he met in that apartment, in the 1970s. It's a different guy now. I have been both those things in my life. I have been a young knucklehead, and well, now I'm an old knucklehead, but I'm still, I maybe a little savvier than I was when I was 23 years old.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because Eric, I was going to ask, for Daniel, so much of the series is about uncovering the truth, even when that truth is being divulged by like an unreliable narrator. I'm curious about what you enjoyed the most about exploring Daniel's past and that whole, what happened in San Francisco. I know you can't completely divulge it, but what did you enjoy the most about that backstory of his?
Well, that somebody could come from such an unfocused background and then become a focused human being is something I really relate to. There are also some other angles to this character that I don't know if I'm imposing it on there, but it's part of me, which is the when in the presence of a bully, really pushing back hard. It's just something that's in me. It's what I grew up being bullied. And so when I was a kid, so when I'm around somebody who starts stuff with me, I hit back quickly. And it's interesting, especially in this business, this is not that kind of set, but sometimes you have sets with very macho directors or macho other actors who decide they're going to get into your space. And that ain't happening with me. And anytime I feel anybody pushing me, I push back. So that's another deep component of this character that I totally am ready to play and ready to rock with this guy. And of course, he does have tremendous powers. There's no question, and he already established this a long time ago, and to me, and once I remember it all, it's pretty clear, he can kill me anytime he feels like it. Like that, he can kill me. And that's pretty heavy when you think about it, that it's right there, inches away. Death.
But what's important I think what's interesting for Armand's side, I think Armand knows he can't kill you just like that whenever he wants, because Louis in the picture.
Classic trying.
It is, and it's like they're all trying, but they're all like vying for power, but I think they're all kind of sort of under straitjackets, and yeah, and it's really...
But the tension is palpable between the two of your characters, and especially when Louis introduces Armand as the love of his life to Daniel. Armand's lived a very long time. Why? And that's a huge compliment. Why does he introduce Louis in that way, and how does Daniel react? Does Daniel believe him?
Well, there's a lot being revealed all within about 13 seconds. So I think Daniel's just got to digest what the WTF, right?
Yeah.
And if you think of Daniel as a detective, everything is a clue. And so he's always looking for clues. And clues can come a lot of different ways. Clues can come as a fact, but it can also come as an absence of a fact. I worked on a book about these assassins years ago. And one of the interesting things is that I was tracking a British secret agent who was working with these assassins. And supposedly he didn't know anything about what was going on. But what's interesting, on the day they killed the guy that they were going to kill, he makes a journal entry every single day, but one day he doesn't make a journal entry. And that's the day that he doesn't make the journal entry, is the day that the target gets assassinated. Kind of interesting. Why aren't you writing that day? Things that aren't there are also interesting. Things that are being offered that seem to be like a gift. These guys are going to tell me everything now. They're going to sit down on the couch and they're going to hold hands and they're going to tell me everything. Well, the very fact that they're doing that has me suspicious right from the beginning. I was like, wait a minute, what? Why are you suddenly being so nice? And why are you now going to tell me the whole story? And the whole time I have to look for inconsistencies. And eventually I get helped along, as you know, but how much I'm supposed to talk about anything. So I'm not.
It's okay. Now, for each of you, what do you think each of your characters understands about Louis that the other does not?
Louis wants he's convinced himself, and that he's nothing but goodness and light to everybody, that he doesn't have a nasty side, but he is a vampire, and Louis is got a very strong, negative, angry, nasty side to himself. And I know that. Yeah. I know that he's a full human being. So I'm going to use all the different aspects of his personality, or I'm going to try to investigate them and tweak them and push him and irritate him so that I can bring that stuff out. Because until he starts getting honest with himself, I mean, this gets really complicated with this show, but because these guys are so, I mean, from a psychological point of view, both Louis and Armand are real cases. I mean, they're cases that Freud could write about. So, I mean, what Louis is, I got to get him to face it. I got to turn his face toward who he is.
See,
and that has a lot to do with his relationship with you.
This is it. And listen to you now, like, I think this is why I'm struggling, is because I think Armand is really afraid that Daniel does know more. Daniel does know Louis more. And he doesn't want to admit it to himself. I think that's what episode 5 is all about, this fascination with this fascinating boy. Like, who is this guy? Who has gripped the love of my life and is making him find things in himself that Armand, hasn't been able to tap into yet. So I think that's what it is that Armand is terrified that Daniel does know Louis a bit more than himself. What he is very sure of is that Daniel can't love Louis in the same way Armand can, and that's what's gripping him. That's what's making him drive forward to keep this sort of happy life in Dubai going, and to get him out as soon as possible.
One of the reasons why I love working on this show is going back to Anne Rice, foundational Anne Rice. What is immortality really? I mean, nobody wants to die, right? But do you really want to live forever? And everybody tells himself a story about themselves in their life. We all have it in our head, like, this is who I am. This was my arc. This is my story. But if you live forever, the story never ends. And if the story never ends, you're faced with some truths about yourself sooner or later. And these guys have been around a long time, and they've been busy lying to themselves for a long time, or not, or whatever. But whatever's happening, it's very dynamic when I enter the picture, or when Daniel enters the picture, and stirs it up, because otherwise they could keep this going forever. They got a little Ferris wheel of emotions going on between the two of them, where they're kind of not telling each other the truth. And like you said, it's a threat because the truth interrupts this psycho relationship thing.
Absolutely. Assad, before I let y'all go, I have to ask, your character is a 500-year-old vampire. For the uninitiated, how's that different than Louis or Claudia or even Lestat?
Well, firstly, your powers, your kind of strength grows with time as a vampire, and
your powers were strong to begin with because they're from Marius.
Magnus.
Yeah. Magnus.
No,
Marius.
Maurice the Romanus. I'm talking about Magnus is a different. Sorry.
Magnus is Lestat's.
Yes, Lestat's vampire.
Maker. Yes.
You got to make it mixed up. Like Eric said, it's never ending. So your perception of it becomes almost jarring. He's gone through cycles of almost civilizations through and lived through them, and seen them crumbled, seen another cycle of existence, another cycle of society building with sometimes the same problems, latched on with new problems and technology and all of that thing. All of this is cyclical. He sees it build and crumble. And I think that does something to you. It affects you in kind of fatalistic ways if you haven't got someone, support to sort of find comfort in. I think that's the beauty of what Anne Rice has done with these. What it means to be a vampire is so close to exploring what it means to live a life without being able to connect to another human being. You see life pass you by, and it can eat you up if you don't have an outlet. And whether that outlet is a person or art or painting, music or whatever. Why do we cling on to life if we know that it's fleeting? But these vampires, it's not fleeting. They will live forever. So, and the question's flipped. Why are they why should they cling on to life? Why not destroy themselves? So,
and my last question is, what does Lestat mean to the two of your characters?
Trouble.
Mystery. I can't wait to meet him.
Awesome. And if you had to say anything to all of the fans out there who are so excited for season 2, what would you tell them in anticipation of the premiere?
It's going to be absolutely fantastic, better than your wildest imaginations, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. Fasten your seatbelts.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Théâtre des Vampires. Everything you're about to see is real.
When beginning work on season 2 of Interview with the Vampire, I heard you took turns reading the second half of Anne Rice's novel aloud with the writers. Is that true? And what did that process reveal about the characters? And did it make any changes in the script for you?
It certainly revealed that we picked the right profession, because it was not the greatest greatest reading of all time. Yeah, it certainly helped out a lot. I think what the big challenge of that book, right, is that there's not a lot of plot. Not a lot happens. There's a lot of wonderful dialogue, and there's a couple of really intense scenes. But in terms of like how we're gonna make 8 episodes out of this, the interviewer, like the Eric Bogosian character, literally doesn't appear to it. Lestat doesn't appear for 200 pages. And so I think we just wanted to kind of ground ourselves again. Everybody had read it, and it was a way to kind of come back and go, well, what did we miss? And just forced to kind of take the time to read it. And it took 2 days for us to kind of get through and to take that much room time to sit there and talk about it. Allowed everybody to, I think, fall in love with her prose again, and then to find some surprises. We found a lot of surprise about Armand in that reading. We kind of have to think about all the books that came after this book, in terms of where we're landing people. And there were some beautiful passages. I think generally speaking, the room felt more empathy for Armand than we might have started with that reading.
When you say read it, did somebody read it?
We would pass the book around and go, okay, you take the next 2 pages. Or someone would come, we would follow along, and someone would, we read it out. We had a reader's theater. Again, really terrible. There's nothing worse than a room of playwrights reading. Right? It's not good. It's a little bit like this, putting these 2 faces on a video interview. Why would you do that? This is like, where's Jacob Anderson? Look at that. Look at these people, and then look at us. This is so sad. This is maybe the saddest moment in Rotten Tomatoes. I never read it there.
I am very curious as to why did you feel more for Armand? What was it that you found in her writing that made you go, I have some sympathy for this man?
Look, we have the responsibility that we're writing these are really major characters, and we know the AMC wants them on for a number of years. And there's easy, quick ways to make all these people villains. And woven into this is this beautiful passage on the embankment. They're sitting there walking, when he's just talking about how much he has thrown against Louis and how Louis has sort of rejected him. It wasn't going to be the entire plot of that, but we could all sit there for a second where everybody was quite moved by that. We all kind of took still, and we were like, oh, and it's something that we had all, when we read, for the first season, I think none of us had really locked in on that. I think it was a real surprise for all of us. And it was like, okay, well, why? We would spend days sometimes thinking, okay, if the show was called Armand, what would we be writing? And that just allows you to sort of like not get overwhelmed by the plot of it all. This character has to do this and this guy, because it opens up another avenue of discovery. And so, yeah, I think I have a very rich, and a number of my writers do, a point of view about Armand that may not be totally satisfying by the end of this season, but actually it allows for so much more stuff to come up after this. There might be characters from season 1 that you maybe left going, I don't like that character. Wait. I would say the same thing for any of our characters. Just wait. Everyone will get their turn. You will be able to try to understand from their point of view why they did what they do. We don't have a lot of room for mustachy, twirly villains on our show. Right? Create like 3-dimensional.
We don't have any of them, do we?
I mean, maybe Santiago this year is just a baddie from Baddie World, but
He doesn't have a mustache.
Well, let's talk about Santiago for a second. What did you love most about his performance and what his character brought to the series and the whole theater of vampires?
Well, I'll tell you, there were 2 people. There's the dirty secret in our writer's room. There were 2 people whose, you can take a headshot from off the internet and put it up on the wall. There were 2 actors that we put up the wall before we cast it. And it was Eric Bogosian and Ben Daniels was up on the wall. Season 2 room comes in and goes, that's Santiago. We're writing for that actor.
He almost didn't, in talking to me about it, didn't talk about Santiago. He talked about Ben.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, this is before we even knew that he was available or wanted to do it.
And then honestly, he wasn't available for a little bit. He was on some other goddamn show, and we got a slight little push that happened, and then he slotted back in. Yeah, I knew the actor that I wanted out there, and we got him. These words were written for the skill set of this actor.
Oh, that's
Super-
incredible.
yeah.
Well, another new person to the cast is Delainey Hayles. Let's talk about her taking over the role of Claudia. And what was the process of casting her like? And how did you know when you found her?
Circumstances, things, we had to make a change, and we were actually pretty close to starting shooting. So we, I think we were maybe 10 days out, 12 days out.
I was going to say it's,
or 2 weeks.
I thought it was 2 weeks.
2 weeks out. And we actually had to, what people will come to know as episode 5, we were going to shoot 1 and 5 together. And because of that casting change, we swapped about. So God bless Assad Zaman. His first day of shooting was the most intense scene. Literally just threw the fire because we had this change. So
How did you know?
When we had this moment? Yeah. So we have Kate Rhodes James, who does our casting in London. She has exquisite taste, and she immediately went to work. And by the time I got on a plane with Levin Aiken, who was our director at the time, and Jacob Anderson, who was living in London, we had 4 candidates. We read them. We read, I think, 3 scenes each. And we said, so let's all talk about all the 4 actors. And we all looked at each other and we said instantly, there wasn't a lot of conversation about it. She came in, I don't know, man, she feels like she parachuted straight from heaven. I can't tell you like what a soulful performer she is, what a lovely, lovely woman she is. And I get very choked up talking about it.
Meanwhile, I and a bunch of us were in Prague waiting for the phone to ring and waiting to get these casting tapes. But it was clear. It was so clear from the very beginning that it was Delainey.
Oh, and 4 lovely actors. Actually, 4 lovely actors. And there was just one who when he sat next to Jacob and they did their scenes in a flat wall with one camera going this way, you could see it.
And it's interesting. We do a screen test. It's never about who's the best. It's not a qualitative thing. It's like, who is the best, who is going to be able to be the best version of this character. So there's, as Rolin said, there's some wonderful actresses who are, I'm sure, going to do very, very well. But Delainey was right for Claudia.
Yeah, she seemed like she was a beautiful old soul trapped in this face. You're like, how old are you? What is going on? Like, what? She's loving it.
So let's swing it back to Louis a little bit. Louis in Paris is not Louis in New Orleans. And the concept of his relationship between him and Armand and the relationship between him and Lestat, very different. What would you say are those major differences?
There's always, for me, we always go back to who's Jacob in Dubai. And so that's actually our measuring stick in our writer's room was, who is he? Episode 1, season 1, when he walks in, he's like, hey, Daniel, you've grown old.
Right.
And with this guy who, like, I think has an idea of like, I'm going to be a little bit more generous to all the people that I talk about. But I think I understand the story I want to deliver to this guy for him to write. Season 2, we've caught him at a very different, very vulnerable place. And Malloy has sort of taken charge of that interview. And it's about watching him recover for a little bit. And then, but continue on this very aggressive, succinct journey about, I want to know what happened. And maybe I have been telling a story about myself to myself for a while. So a lot of times, even though, yes, there's the New Orleans guy, you're watching from innocence to experience, still upset. There's something that happens, episode 3 of last year was like, he finally announces, I am a vampire. It wouldn't be until actually episode 1 of this season when you actually see there's a moment that's quite cold, not cuddly Louis anymore, that he kind of just goes, nope. And you're like, oh, that's when that's the moment he's a vampire. And then, we sort of tell the story of a guy trying to find himself a little bit on his own terms about trying to find out who he is. It's a 15-episode movie. He's our hero. He has to have the most conflict. He has to have the most shading of any character that we have. And he goes through, I think, a fairly massive arc between the 2 seasons. So, yeah, I would say, don't worry about it. You're going to love Louis by the end like you love him now. But you're about to go on a little journey with Louis. And there's going to be some uncomfortable moments.
And his relationship with Lestat in this season is, in theory, in absentia. How does he appear? When does he appear? When does he haunt him? And it's a great reflection of Louis never being able to rid himself of Lestat and never, quite frankly, wanting to rid himself of Lestat.
Yeah, Lestat is what, dish throwing, screaming, yelling. Let's make up it afterwards,
right?
That kind of thing. And Armand is kindness as a weapon for a while.
And Armand also has about 200 years, I think, on Lestat.
He's been around much longer. Has had
You've done your research,
right? Thrust into a job that he may not have been well suited for, and still endures. There's a different kind of attraction. It's quite a deeply romantic attraction with Armand for a while. So we take our time courting for a little bit. The job was put Louis through the ringer and put it again and do it one more time and then dig a hole and then bury him and then put him down. We just tried to destroy him.
You just love torturing. You just love torturing Louis.
Yeah.
But also Daniel Malloy in season 2 also kind of gets put through the ringer a little bit. What was your mission this time with him in season 2 versus season 1?
Season 1, he mostly functions as a terrific foil, as a guy who's asking hard questions and making sure that we are getting as much of the truth as possible. But there's this sort of looming weird thing. It's like, why is there a second interview? What is this all about? Why did they come back again? And we owed that. And we always were going to tell that. Eventually, you just run out of, hey, old salty dog, smartass. That just gets really boring dramatically. So you got to give him stakes in the story, and you got to give him a story to tell. So the entrance that he makes is about, sure, I'm a way better journalist than I am now, but these two have a history that has not been particularly explored by either one of these very, very smart men. And it's watching like the failure of intelligence play out, and watching like these emotions that I think both of them try to keep down start spilling out, and seeing you can't just function as a guy who asks the questions. He has to have some stake in the story. So
in the story, yes. And
we have an extraordinary actor there, in Eric, and we were just like, let's get him raw. Let's rip at him.
I'm very curious as to the where you and changes that you made for season 2 that might have been affected by the strike. Did you have to change anything around? I mean, was it? But I mean, it sounds like both the recasting and the strike had you kind of spinning your wheels there a little bit.
Yeah, that's the show. I mean, last year we had tornadoes, and we had we had COVID, and we had this show is just in theory snake bitten about production. It's just there's going to be there's just going to be a lot of obstacles about it. What did the strike do? Some writing got really, really expedited. We just had to write quicker. And I think that if there's anything that I feel really quite good about at the end of this is because I was not able to produce in the way that I would normally want to produce, that we hired the right people, because our actors knew their roles really well, and our designers, when they were led, where they were sort of abandoned by leadership, all knew what they were doing, and they had a lot of quote unquote skin in the game. And so that I could say with great confidence, who needs a showrunner for anything? Because everyone was sort of out there on doing a balancing act about it. But I don't think the strike was just one of 19 other things that made it very, very challenging. This is one of those quote unquote really hard shoots. We were very ambitious. We took a big swing. I'm proud of it. Like I am proud of nothing I have ever done.
Last 2 questions. What, this is for both of you, favorite scene of season 2?
It's always easy for me because I can
Go and start
small scenes. There's little small scenes. I know they're big scenes. I won't do that because they're all spoilers. So like in season 1, my favorite scene was that balcony scene in the finale when he's just going there talking about New Orleans, and he knows that Louis is going to.
Oh, yes, sure.
So things like that are the scenes that I'm sort of attracted to. I think there's a lot of beauty in episode 3. There's a scene when Armand and Louis take a walk along the river, along the Seine. For that kind of scene, and you've seen it in a bazillion different movies, from the 2 performances, the lighting, cinematography, Lestat's creepy ass presence in it, and Daniel Hart's absolutely luminescent score. I cannot tell you how great the score is for season 2 of this thing. That's a scene that turned out quite lovely. And also because we were shooting Prague for Paris, but then we had 5 days to kind of shoot a number of exteriors in Paris to sort of make it all come together. And that was one of those things that was shot in Paris, and you just can't replicate it anywhere else. I love that scene.
I think for me, it's probably a series of scenes, and they all have to do with Lestat. I love the idea of the specter of Lestat on Louis, so that he comes at the most inappropriate times. And I think it's a wonderful way to deal with memory and the effect of somebody who you absolutely cannot forget. So even in episode 1, when there are a couple of times that Lestat appears, and they're both, I think, just emotionally disruptive, and I think they're really wonderful.
Supposedly season 2 finishes the first book in the series. This is for me. I need to know how long I need to wait to see the Queen of the Damned. Where is Akasha? Where is my girl?
There's a whole book in between.
Where is my girl?
How dare you? As you know, I think, if you know Queen of the Damned, we have sort of different words for it, but it's already present, isn't it? We're already talking about things that are happening there that will set up that thing. All of the first 6 books, they're all present in the story that we're telling. You know, eventually these things that we're going to slowly be moving to the here and now. There's going to be less of the past than the past going forward. There's still going to be a lot of it, but Queen of the Damned's already beginning to, rumbles of that are already happening in our show right now. So there's no green light for the next season. But if we were going to do a next season, it's going to be the Vampire Lestat. That's what it's going to be.
Lestat front and center.
Lestat front and center of the show. And he's been Sam Reid's been quite lovely, being a very, very wonderful supporting buttress to the show, but he gets to tell his story. And the level of ambition for it is quite high. It's the one that I wanted to do when I signed up to do the show.